Valve has released the new version of the Steam Deck with the Steam Deck OLED. I've had my hands on it for about a week now, and I want to talk about my experiences with this versus the original model Steam Deck, so that if you've been on the fence about wanting to get one or not, curious about the original versus the new one, maybe you have an original and you're thinking about upgrading the OLED, we're going to go over what makes this one better and whether or not it's worth grabbing instead of the regular. Now, my main comparison here is going to be against the 256GB model from the original run, which actually works out really nicely because this model is the one that is still currently available and is the new entry-level pricing option that they have on their website. This used to be the mid-spec one at $529. Now it's only $400, and if you want to get higher than that, you're going to be jumping into OLED territory. Now, the specific OLED that I have here, as you might be able to tell, is the limited edition model, meaning that it is basically spec-wise the exact same thing as the top-of-the-line 1TB model. The only differences being that the design of this, as well as the interior of the carrying case, are done differently in order to reflect being a limited edition, having this nice little smoky clear shell with little accents of orange on the sticks, power button, and the vents, which personally I love. I've seen a few people say they don't care for the orange highlight. I personally eat it up because I find single color systems to be a little boring looking, and just the nice little touch of accent that orange gives to me looks really good. And on top of that, it very much has strong Half-Life vibes, which if you're gonna associate any major franchise with Valve, it's that or Portal. Now, it's worth noting that with the Steam Deck OLED, there are actually two different models, a 512GB and 1TB. Aside from the differences in storage, the only change between them is that the 1TB also comes with a special different kind of case, which is something we'll talk about, as well as anti-glare glass to help with visibility in some lighting conditions. One thing I want to shout out is that this video is particularly focused on just Steam Decks versus Steam Decks. I also am very curious to compare the OLED versus the ROG Ally, because you get into a very interesting conversation of display technology benefits versus just the raw power the Ally offers. So that is a video I'm planning to do hopefully in about another week, maybe a little more. So if you don't want to miss out on that video, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you don't miss out. So let's talk about this new top-end one versus what is now the entry-level system. There are honestly a whole lot of different upgrades worth mentioning, a lot of ones that I would say are relatively minor but still improve the overall experience of the system in a couple different ways. This includes things like the improved Wi-Fi, which if you are playing online games often with the Steam Deck can be a more meaningful thing, especially if you have the kind of router to take full advantage of it. The body has been ever so slightly redesigned in a couple areas. I think the most notable one for me is that the sticks have a more exaggerated edging to them, so it feels better for keeping your thumbs on them, a little less slippy. The system in general runs more efficiently, which translates not only to better battery life, which is a bigger point we'll talk about in a little bit, but also means the system is running cooler in a lot of situations and just doesn't get as hot to the touch. Not that that was ever a massive problem on the older one, but still good. Also a better sign for long-term longevity. And this new system is ever so slightly lighter than the regular LCD model. When it comes to important big changes though, the key two really are the display and the battery life. Starting with the battery, because that's kind of the easier one to sum up real quick, there are numerous enhancements on this new Steam Deck that just allows it to have a longer battery life. The battery capacity in the first place is larger, while also features a more energy efficient chip thanks to a die shrink. Also, the change to OLED, depending on the games you're playing, can also impact the battery drain on it, because the more pixels it's not lighting up, the less power that's being drawn. And overall, these upgrades, in Valve's estimation, comes out to basically a 50% increase across the board. The original model is slated for 2 to 8 hours of battery life. The new OLED is between 3 and 12, and that matches up a lot with my experience. And what this really ends up meaning is, depending on the kind of games you're actively playing on your Steam Deck, you're either going to notice a nice increase that still dies fairly quickly, or a pretty significant increase in the total runtime of the system. If you're running super demanding stuff all the time, like you're primarily playing Cyberpunk or Baldur's Gate 3, that's going to drain the battery pretty quick still, and 3 hours is better than 2 hours, but still not the absolute longest playtime. But if you're playing less demanding titles, certain smaller indies, or games that just have much simpler visuals and are not nearly as demanding, that difference of going from a top end of 8 to 12 is pretty significant. I've absolutely noticed on my time with the OLED that I've been able to use it for much longer periods of time before needing to plug in and charge. And again, you'll still kill it pretty quick with certain high demanding titles, but playing a mixture of different stuff across the board, it definitely lasts longer. As for the display, there is a lot going on here upgrade-wise. I mean, the simple version of this, right, is that, oh, the new one's OLED and the old one's LCD, but it goes quite a bit farther than that actually in a couple different ways. First off, yes, it is an OLED display, meaning that it is lighting up individual pixels rather than having a full backlight hitting the entire screen, which helps result in things like deeper blacks. While this does benefit a wide variety of games, where I find it's very noticeable is in a lot more artistically striking games that make use of negative space and black as a contrast. Stuff like Hollow Knight or Hades really shows off what you can achieve as far as the contrast between the deep dark blacks and the brighter colors and whites that contrast that. What really helps this become more noticeable is the fact that not only is this display OLED, but it is also just a brighter screen in general. The original Steam Deck is rated at having at around a 400 nit display, whereas with the Steam Deck OLED, you're hitting 600 as an average, and it is capable of hitting a peak nits of 1000 because it is also an HDR display. Now, as of right now, on a system level, the Steam Deck doesn't support any kind of auto HDR feature. It's not going to be adding it to games that don't traditionally have it, but those games that do support HDR as a core part of it, for instance, things like Cyberpunk, you're able to hit these much brighter highs in some select areas. And there's even actually a really handy built-in tool to the Steam Deck where you can do things like see a heat map in-game or have metrics on how the HDR is running to really give you an idea of where these peaks are being seen that normally wouldn't be possible on a different display. Now, that support for HDR is really nice, and those games that can capitalize on it benefit from it, but I actually think the bigger thing here is just the fact that the baseline nits are higher. There is a greater clarity and visibility to the screen, especially in more lit conditions, that really makes a significant difference to me. Alongside with this change of display technology, two other differences worth noting about this display is that it is a larger screen going to 7.4 from 7. It's not the most significant increase. It does give you a little more screen space to look at, but it's not like a massive margin difference. When you look at it in comparison to, say, when the Switch to Switch OLED went from 6.2 to 7, that was really noticeable. 7 to 7.4, it's more, but it's not like, oh my god, there's so much more screen space now, at least for me. It is noticeably larger, but not by a significant margin. What is also improved, however, that's worth noting, is the refresh rate. While both of these Steam Decks have the same display resolution of 1280 by 800, the original Steam Deck and the Steam Deck LCD that's still available had a refresh rate of 60 Hz, while the OLED now offers 90 Hz. What this means is that when you are playing those games that can hit that higher frame rate, going beyond 60 and up to 90, you are going to get more fluid-looking gameplay. I will say that because of the general performance spec of the Steam Deck, it's not exactly going to be hitting that very often for more demanding, up-to-date major games today, even when you turn down a lot of the settings. But for those less demanding games or stuff that are a few years old, you can definitely hit that higher refresh rate and see the difference in smoothness. All of these changes to the display combined result in what in my mind is a far better experience than the regular Steam Deck. Not that the regular one is bad by any means necessary. It is a good-looking display. Plenty of people picked up the original Steam Deck and had no problems with it. The colors, contrast, clarity, the smoothness on those games that can hit higher frame rates all benefit in just what ends up being a much better looking image. Now, something I think is worth pointing out is that similar to when Switch made the change from the original Switch to the Switch OLED, the Steam Deck to Steam Deck OLED has the same kind of trade-off of ultimately all these benefits work out great when you're playing in handheld often. If for whatever reason though you do like to use your Steam Deck primarily docked, doesn't really mean much difference-wise. I mean, sure, the OLED models are going to come with a higher base storage that you can take advantage of, although the microSD card readers are still impressively fast for loading games off of still. But really, most of the updates and changes that benefit the OLED don't really mean a whole lot if you're going to be using it docked more often. Improved battery life doesn't mean much if you're drawing power from the dock. The display itself means absolutely nothing if you're relying on an external display as well. Basically, every major upgrade that happens on this system benefits it primarily as a dedicated handheld. And if for whatever reason you like using your Steam Deck docked more often, which in my mind slightly defeats the purpose of the system, it's worth noting that the OLED isn't really getting you that much over the original. One benefit specific to the 1TB model I do want to shout out real quick is that while all models come with a carrying case, the 1TB model has a new revised option that offers a dual layer carrying case. The benefit of it being that you can use it like the traditional carrying case where it's this bulky protective shell that will make sure the system is nice and safe, but if you'd rather something that's a little slimmer and lower profile and sacrifice a bit of protection for it, maybe because you're going to put it in a bag anyways, you can remove the inner lining of the carrying case and that acts as a smaller, slimmer case. Not an absolute make or break feature. I don't think that's reason enough to spend the extra $100 to grab a 1TB model, though the extra storage space on top is certainly the main attractive point, but something that's worth pointing out. So the big question here is, with these major updates and changes, what does it look like debating between the currently available LCD model and 256 versus these OLED options? Now again, the 256 used to be the mid-spec model at $530. It's now only $400, so it is a significantly cheaper option all around and is a pretty strong value. But with the OLED, for an extra $150, you get twice the storage space at $512, along with all the benefits the OLED model now offers. And then for an extra $100 at the highest price point is $650, you can get that 1 terabyte model with the slightly fancier case. As it stands in my mind, I think the price difference is completely worth it. I mean, when we're already talking about spending above $300 and it's a pretty significant investment, the extra $150 in my mind is absolutely worth it to get the updates and upgrades that the OLED model brings. Not just in terms of some useful things like storage, but ultimately the display in my mind really does make that significant of a difference. Of course, if $400 is something that just makes more affordable sense to you and that difference of $150 really is a significant barrier, the LCD model is still perfectly fine. Performance-wise, these are ultimately the same system. It's not like the OLED is going to get you higher base frame rates for more demanding games or better visual effects. Aside from the increased refresh rate of 60 to 90 Hertz, there's nothing as far as the performance side of systems that actually makes games themselves run specifically better. It's just how much you're getting out of the display that can make a difference here. So if you just want access to a Steam Deck in general and you really don't want to pay any more money, the $400 option right now for the LCD is perfectly fine. But if you can muster up that difference, increased battery life, the change in display, the higher storage, in my mind makes the $550 option of this system really the definitive choice for most people. An extra $100 for the 1 terabyte storage and the nicer case can be a little tempting, and if you just have the money to throw down, sure, you can do that. But I really do think the $512 is the perfect balance of price for value for most people, especially because, again, that micro SD card reader in these actually works out pretty well. Now, the bigger head-scratching question is, what if you already bought a regular Steam Deck and the OLED is looking really shiny to you? That's a tougher question to answer, to be honest. A lot of it comes down to what your personal circumstances are, how much you feel comfortable spending to basically just replace your system outright. Obviously, you can try and sell your current one to take some of the heat off a little bit. In all honesty, I do think this is a rougher choice to make. If you're able to get a good price for your current one and you've got the money to spend, yeah, the OLED is absolutely a better experience. But ultimately, again, still, if you have a current version of the LCD, it's going to be playing all the same games at basically the same specs, aside from those occasional times where you could hit the frame rate above 60 to take advantage of the higher refresh rate system. If the Steam Deck is your primary way of playing games, it's what you put the most time on and you really use it constantly and you've got the money to burn, yeah, an upgrade to the OLED might be worth it because you are going to end up getting the much better overall experience. But if the Steam Deck is something that you just break out on occasion and use it for specific situations, it's not really your go-to system all the time, upgrading doesn't really feel like that much of a necessity to me right now, especially because the entry level is, again, that $550 and not the lower $400. Ultimately, all this does, of course, come down to your own use cases of how often you see yourself using the system, as well as just how comfortable you are spending that much money. But my main kind of walkaway opinion is, if you don't have a Steam Deck yet, go for the OLED. It's just a significant gain for how much more you're paying. And if you already have a Steam Deck, it's not really that necessary of an upgrade unless you really do use it as your primary system all the time and you want to get the absolute most out of it. So yeah, those are my thoughts on the Steam Deck OLED and how it compares to the original model, which one is still worth currently grabbing. If you are interested in grabbing any of them, I do have links posted down below in the description. As always, if you enjoyed this video, hit the thumbs up button to let me know. I am planning on some more OLED coverage, particularly comparing it against the ROG Ally, so if you don't want to miss out on that, make sure to subscribe, and I will see you guys later.